Welcome to Brad Allen Drums. For those of you who are new, I'm Brad Allen. I'm a professional drummer who has also spent over 20 years teaching private drum lessons. Today I'm going to talk with you a little bit about double bass drum. First thing I'd like to say, if you are into speed metal, you're really into double bass, that inspires you, then I don't want to say anything to discourage you. You know, I've had several students that went on to play that kind of music. I kind of pointed them in the right direction, and they took it from there, and they're doing great with that kind of drumming. So if that's your thing, I say more power to you. In that kind of music, you know, if you're going to go play in a speed metal band, obviously you need to know how to play double bass. Again, if that inspires you, then that's fantastic. The reason I wanted to make this video is I feel like there's a lot of young drummers who put a little bit too much emphasis on double bass and double bass pedal. I've never emphasized double bass as a teacher. And the reason I do that is my whole goal is to take you from A to B, from complete beginner to being a competent drummer, to being a good drummer who's able to play in a band as quick as possible. And I feel like it can be a distraction or something that's kind of unnecessary for a beginning drummer. It's not something that I think a beginning drummer should be, really that concerned about. And I'll explain why in just a minute here. First of all, when you go to play in various types of bands, what they're going to care about is that you can play a good groove, good beat, and you give them a comfortable ride. Again, if you were playing in a speed metal band, that could mean using a very fast double bass pattern. So that's a different situation. But for most other bands, that's not the case. I experimented a little bit early on with double bass. When I was in the military band, we had some double bass pedals, and I did practice with them for a while. I eventually kind of discarded those just because I wasn't that interested. And the reason I wasn't that interested, again, I didn't feel like it was something that I really needed. A lot of the drummers who inspired me were the most creative drummers. And a lot of those guys I felt were a lot more creative with one bass drum than a lot of guys were with two bass drums. Some of those drummers were people like John Bonham, who played lots of interesting things, very technical things with one bass drum. Stuart Copeland of the Police, Steve Gadd. So that's the first thing is I simply feel like a lot of the things that those drummers play are more interesting. And I was interested in playing things that were more interesting rather than playing things that just sounded flashy, so to speak. Now, I will say, when you're playing with one bass drum, you cannot play as many notes on the bass drum as you can with two. That's obvious. But then the reason I decided that wasn't necessary for me is my goal is to groove. My goal is to create something interesting, and I don't necessarily need to put that many notes on the bass drum to make it an interesting groove. I would rather put notes on the hi-hat, notes on toms, other things. The other thing I'll say about playing a single bass setup is that you can play a lot of things that actually sound like a double bass on a single bass set. You can play things between the toms and the bass, and it doesn't sound exactly like a double bass, but to someone who doesn't know what they're listening to, it's going to sound a lot like it. So for me, that was a good substitution. The other thing is I didn't like having to set up a double bass setup. This can become a real issue if you're gigging 5 times a week and you have to set all this equipment up yourself. It was kind of a pain to get it positioned right. So I'm kind of a minimalist when it comes to equipment. I don't necessarily like to have lots of equipment. If I was playing in some famous rock band and I had roadies to set everything up for me every night, I'd probably feel differently. But that was never the case, and it isn't for most professional drummers. And so that's just something to think about. So that's all I have to say about the subject. It's nice to be able to play a double bass. I think you should do it if it's something that really inspires you, and the drummers that you listen to, if those are the people that you really want to play like, then by all means, play the double bass. I don't think that it's the shortest path to becoming a really good drummer necessarily. And so I think there's other things you could be working on. I think you could be working on various types of grooves, getting your hands together, getting your rudiments together, reading, things like that. Maybe learning how to solo. I'd like to thank you for watching. I also have a gift I'd like to give you. If you're interested in getting your hands together and simply learning to play faster on the drums, I have 10 exercises I've created. And these are the same type of exercises that helped my student Matthew Lam to win a fastest hands drumming competition. Just follow the link in the video or in the video notes, and I'll see you next time.